We're going to begin the meeting. We have almost a full committee here. The one person we're missing is Senator Starr. So other than that, Seth, do you do roll call for this meeting? Do you want to go ahead and do it?
If you'd like, yes. Senator Marquez?
Here.
Senator Bruce Starr? Representative Lou Frederick?
Here.
Representative John Huffman? Here. Nori Juba?
Here.
Peyton Chapman?
Here.
Nancy Golden?
Here. Okay, so if we want to take a look at the agenda, and what I want you to notice is that there's been a minor change in the agenda item form from meetings where draft concept paper has been vetted. So, Hilda, what are we really doing there?
We just felt like we started off with this being a topic that was solely on our testimony to the Senate Interim Committee and in Education and Workforce Development, and then we realized, wow, we've got such wonderful feedback from the Oregon Education Investment Board committee members when Peyton came and helped present that we wanted to share that as well.
Okay. So first, Peyton, we really want to thank you for your testimony. I think that was really great at the Oregon Education Investment Board because our process is that, we're all coming up with possible investments, policy investments, and then it all goes to the Outcomes and Investment Committee and back to the whole board. So it's very important that they're informed about this work. So I know how busy high school principals are, so I really appreciate it. It was great. So what you're going to find in your packet is you're going to find, in a sec, you're going to find some additional notes. The one that is just feedback from the group. So with that, I'm going to see if there's an approval of the minutes.
For the agenda change.
Well, okay, approval for the agenda change. Do I hear a motion?
I so move.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. So we started talking a little bit about the external. Yeah. Okay. So we're also going to need approval of the meeting notes. So do I hear a motion on that?
I so move.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, great. Okay, so we already let Peyton know we appreciate her work. If you just take a look at some of the input, what you're going to see is that I talked a little bit about the OEIB. There was also a meeting with OEA leadership, and if you remember at one of the last testimonies, people said you need to talk more to educators who are doing the work, and we thought that was a great idea. So we did work with people from OEA leadership to put together a group, and their information is in here as well. And we're also going to schedule another meeting and include AFT representatives too. So we'll just continue to get the input from both of those important groups. And then the last thing is that there was a Senate Interim Committee on Education, which Hilda and I had a chance to talk to, and you'll see some talking points from that too. So do you want to go over any of these talking points? I know people have had the material.
Well, I think one of the things that came through was Senator Roblin's comments around equity and mirroring the real focus of this work around creating equitable access and understanding that typically we sometimes overlook all students, availability of these courses for all students. So that really mirrored a lot of the conversations that we've heard in here. And I think Peyton did a marvelous job at the Oregon Education Investment Board, kind of giving some updates on the benefits of co-locating programs in early college. So just appreciative of that. We got some specifics too that we're going to be embedding in this next version of the paper that you'll receive. And we've held off on issuing another version with all these comments because we know that today we're going to hear a little bit more from some folks who have been busy since our last meeting, and we want to be able to incorporate great suggestions and ideas that come forward from that group.
Okay. So are we ready to take a look at the
I
draft?
think you have a question.
Well, I just wanted to, speak at least a little bit, and echo something that was said in the feedback that you got. I am interested in making sure that the ORVED effort is put in as part of that presentation, the discussion, and mentioned specifically. I see that as an opportunity that we can work with in a much stronger fashion.
Good.
So
I agree with
please keep that in there.
that. Okay. Any other comments about anything so far?
I guess I would like to say I've just had a hiring experience lately and want to share it. We've been talking a lot with the community college partners and heard some of their concerns around wanting to make sure that high school educators are really qualified and meet the standards. I've also just had a different situation, so I'm glad that meetings are being scheduled with OEA, because we found a candidate for an advanced math position that was teaching at the community college level and at the university level, and also had a master's in mathematics and statistics, and was more than willing to come and teach to provide college credit, as well as support struggling kids because of his work at community college. But we couldn't consider him because he didn't have his master's in teaching. So he had been teaching at 3 different colleges, actually, with a range of students, community college and PSU level. And then, so he had experience teaching, successful, and he had his master's in math and statistics, and we wanted him to teach a high school statistics class to earn college credit. And so the only option was he either need to go to PSU and enroll to get a 3rd master's in teaching so that we could hire him. And so I think we do need to be working not only with our higher ed partners, but also with OEA and our local teachers unions, because I could hire just a teacher who had a master's in teaching but actually no experience at college and wouldn't have a master's in their content area to be the teacher of record and pay them, and then also figure out how to pay or partner with higher ed so we could pay twice. And that's not going to get what we want for kids across our state in an efficient and effective way. So I just want to validate this.
So Peyton, isn't that mainly a TSPC?
That's what I was going to say.
It's a teacher
Yes.
license
Yes.
issue to me.
It is, but I also serve on the Lewis and Clark Accreditation Board and also now the PSU Accreditation Board. And so I have put out there, well, why do some teachers need to go back and get their master's in teaching? And so we want to talk to our higher ed partners also and teacher education programs, because that raises red flags for them. I mean, that's their bread and butter. So I think that there are a lot of stakeholders and partners. If we're going to ask one group to be flexible and support what's best for kids, we need to probably work with multiple groups. So I wanted to just put that out there.
Yes, and this is one of the roles I like with OAIB, which I call myself a barrier buster, because each situation has different issues about them. If we have people from community college, and we heard people say there's a lot of part-time staff in community colleges who would love to come and teach, we have that certification issue. And then we would also have the concern from, OEA represents higher ed too, but from the K-12, is this person taking part of my position? And so I think each of these have, related to them issues that we need to work through. And so I think that's partly what we want to accomplish with this committee, is to really, A, know what they are, B, understand them, and come up with something that can really make it so kids can really get 9 college credits and much more in high school and be on that pathway to the 40-40-20. So, yeah. Okay, thank you. Any other issues just like that people want to mention? I think since we've been involved in this, we have heightened awareness, and so I think sometimes you go out and you're just watching very carefully what naturally happens. Anybody else had any recent experiences? No? Okay. Thank you, Peyton. So the next thing we're going to do is we have a draft legislative concept report prepared by the Accelerated Learning Committees. No, we're not sharing that
Well,
report, that's what you said.
So where we are on this is that I know all of us had a chance to read this more carefully since last meeting, and also to perhaps have some insights that could help strengthen the concepts or questions or concerns. So we wanted to make sure that during this meeting that the committee members had a chance to say anything that had come to their minds or discussions with other folks out in the rest of the state resulting from this paper. Then we're going to move into a discussion about some of the one-time initiatives that are referenced in this paper, but we wanted to make sure everybody had a chance to weigh in on any insights. And I think somebody joined us on the phone. It might be Senator Stark.
Do we have someone on the phone?
Yes, Marla Edge from Oregon Tech.
Okay, thank you, Marla. So you're talking about...
Peter Samba from OEID as well.
Okay, so before we actually get into it, you're just wondering if there's any questions about it?
About the paper we shared last month.
Oh, the full paper, all right. So you've seen additional input on the full paper. So now the question is, based on your review, are there any more questions?
I had a question, but it's really not for out on the paper itself. I'm just curious, John, your view on both the strategies, the partnership development, and the on-course offerings.
Oh, those are the strategic investments. So
Oh, sorry.
We'll walk through that in a moment.
I'm ahead of myself. Sorry.
Okay, that's fine. You're on target.
Got out of that.
It's a little confusing because there's two papers
Yes.
and one is
Right.
in front of you and the other isn't in front of you. It was been in front of you in the past.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
what you do have is the feedback from other groups on the other paper.
Can we see him on our screens?
Sure, if you press the power button,
Ah.
it should come on.
That's what we need to do. Thank you. So background on this. Within the paper at the very end, we highlighted a couple of potential areas that may need some one-time funding to initiate and move forward. And I have to put a caveat on this, that in my conversations with Nancy and with Senator Haas, as I was putting together the format, answering the questions that would have to go to the Outcomes and Investments subcommittee of the OEIB, it became clear to me that one of the strategies that was in the original paper might not be ready for prime time. And I think as we hear more today from the folks at OCCA and COSA, this might become clearer. So your original paper still has this strategy in there, but when I get to that point, I'll tell you that it's not in the PowerPoint slide. Does that make sense? So first off, just a reminder for everyone, this is partly what will be shared with the Outcomes and Investments Subcommittee if this committee here approves moving forward on this today. So there is a potential action for you to consider. We wanted to also just clarify that this is a broad term that we've been using, accelerated and acceleration, to really talk about all of the kinds of programs that students can gather or can have access to, and that these vary in terms of where they're located, who might be teaching them, and yet still stay true to the very nature of what this committee is about, is increasing the opportunities for high school students to gain access to college credit while they're in high school. So these are the three potential suggested draft one-time strategic investments. And then there are slides that follow the protocol that we were given by the Outcomes and Investments Subcommittee, and I'll walk you through those. This is just the overview. So let's take a look at the very first strategy. This was the concept that when we started to look across the state, and we are still getting raw data, thanks to people like Bob Cairn and Elizabeth Cox-Brand and some of our school districts, we're getting a better picture geographically of where we do not have at least 3 college courses available for students enrolled in high school. And we think that's an emergency in a way to get them jump-started into this. And what we've learned from looking at all of the work that has transpired is that you have to bring the partners together. They have to really look at what are the needs in the community, what are going to be the plans around which support students will receive. They would have to actually, and they don't have a partnership in place, some of the high schools. Whereas other places in the state, they meet regularly. The Eastern Promise folks, as you certainly know, have lots of conversations around these things. And yet we thought if we could hone in on particularly the schools that are serving students who are the most underrepresented in our post-secondary and that don't have even 3 classes, 1 class, some of them have 0 classes available, that this might be a start for them. And they would also be, of course, we were asked, well, if you did that, what would it do towards an outcome for the achievement compacts? And so, of course, this would be increasing students that were able to quickly start being able to take courses while enrolled, college courses while still enrolled in high school. We were also asked, what are the annual data that you would use to measure the improvement if there were a specific seed funding in this? And of course, we would be looking at the high school offerings, looking at who are the partners, whether or not these courses are offered face-to-face, maybe a hybrid program, and whether or not it's an early college program. Yes.
So Hilda, you're talking like that's an inventory that yet needs to be done.
It is an inventory that still needs to be done, and what the bigger paper, the concept paper, talks about how do you sustain this for long term and keep a funding model that gets everybody doing it and continuing to do it. What we're concerned about is there's some that haven't even started planning. They haven't even sat down and figured out, our kids don't have this, and we haven't partnered with our post-secondary partners to get this going. So this is sort of some seed funding for those really tiny districts that are high schools specifically that don't have anything in place. And I think Peyton really helped us when she made a comment several meetings ago that we sometimes assume, well, in an urban area there must be lots of opportunities for students, and yet she talked about the variability across high schools within an urban area and that they're not even equal. So this would be an analysis that we would do with ODE and Bob Kieran's data and Elizabeth Cox-Brand to identify those really at the very bottom of the list in terms of offerings for students. And this would be a small amount of seed funding to get them convened, because you have to pay for substitutes for teachers, to get them out to meet with the post-secondary folks, to look at the planning needs, figure out how many kids, what courses would be best, how are they going to be offered, are there instructors available? That takes time. And so this was just a way to kind of get that started in communities where that hadn't occurred at all.
And then the question that I had on the analysis, that I apologize, I forget what your response was, but I was thinking that David Edwards was going to be working on an analysis. I could be wrong on that.
He actually has returned to private industry, and he's doing quite well.
Good for him.
So we kind of lost a little ground there, and we're back on track now.
But that's kind of related on that inventory about, what would it cost Beaverton versus Fossil? And how would the delivery take place, and what's the cost differential, and how? So is
we
the
are
analysis
working
gonna
on
be a
that
part?
currently. That part we hope to bring to you in August. The fiscals for the concept paper itself. Again, these are one-time. Where are the greatest needs that we can plug the holes in, and then have everybody kind of moving forward on equal footing.
I have a concern about the capacity of the individual schools to be able to do this kind of a survey, not the next step in terms of just having teachers talking with the potential partners in the community, but having it any time during the school days or during the school year to even do that kind of a survey. I mean, one of the biggest complaints I heard from schools and principals in particular was that you'd say, well, just get this done as well. And they were already doing an awful lot, and they didn't have time to spend on something new. So just keep that in mind. I think the capacity issue is not a trivial one.
I was thinking the same thing, but I think there's an easy solution. And I was just thinking about IB. So the IB program requires that you have a half-time or a full-time IB coordinator. And we have been working closely with PSU to also offer college credit outside of IB. So we have a career pathways coordinator. Every high school in Portland Public Schools has a career coordinator. So the career coordinator has been doing all of that outreach to the School of Engineering, the School of Business, the School of Education. How can we offer college 101 credits? So I don't know what other districts do, but I think in the short term, when you factor into your budgets, if you have either a half of an FTE or a full FTE, to be that either college and career partner or the equivalent of a, not IB coordinator, but college credit coordinator, that you'll need that in the short term, and maybe over time, if the relationships really gel, you won't, but given the movement of teachers, certainly in large urban areas. But I think Representative Frederick, is correct in that teachers in Beaverton, for example, talk about having 240 kids and 3 preps, and so that they're not even willing. Even in Portland Public Schools, it's harder and harder to get teachers to take a student teacher, right, because it requires talking to somebody at their school of education.
The only other suggestion that has been done in other areas is to think about, and remember, this is for the 15-17 biennium. And if you thought about when that biennium would start, we may have an opportunity to maximize some summer time where teachers have dedicated, they have a little bit more flexibility to not feeling like they're pulled away from the classroom. And that's why the importance of a stipend would be so essential. And the same is true for the faculty in the courses at the post-secondary partners. To really, and it might be even more time efficient, because you could actually do an institute of some sort where you put people together for a concentrated amount of time and get the work done even more quickly.
Well, my point is not so much after you've decided you're going to do this. We just need to just doing the survey itself, getting that information is the key element for me, because in many cases, the teachers, the counselors do not have the time. Even the career folks, I forgot what the phrase is now. They are booked right now with everything else too. And so it's saying, okay, now we're going to add this to you as well. They're going to say, why do you keep adding more things? I'm just barely getting by on what I'm doing right now. So just keep that in mind.
I believe the finding out which courses are offered and which ones might need to be offered could probably be done with the administrative staff at the school too. That's just a simple, what do you offer? It's time intensive right now, which is why we haven't got that chart for you yet, because it means nobody collects it statewide. That's the problem. So.
Well, my point is that I saw this at the state Board of Education level. I saw it at the district level. There would be something that would appear to be a very simple sort of task, when in fact it was not as simple, and it did take away time. And so let's just keep that in mind. That's all I'm suggesting.
Peter, do you have any input about that, being someone working on the longitudinal database? Or?
Well, what we do have across the state is more and more districts who are putting their data into data warehouses using Common Course coding. And I know it's something that this year we're collecting data on courses and the class counts in the courses. That's a new collection of data at ODE. So I believe that kind of data is much more automatic. The potential is there to update that or produce a report like that on a statewide basis. But it's something that's it's emerging, and this is the first year we're actually keeping track of class counts and associated with each course. So I guess I'd say we're moving forward in that area. The longitudinal database will have that. It'll have that exact kind of data. which we'll get from the ODE.
So that could be something that's not labor intensive.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and I can do more research on the status of that with the ODE. It's not exactly what I'm responsible for, but I can find out more on their timelines, whether they can give that report this year after they get the submission from districts.
So to look back at this strategy one, I'm hearing that under the third big bullet, where it says moderate investment would support the partnership development, I'm hearing that next bullet, assess local accelerated option needs, that maybe that one comes off because by 15, 17, we may have better access to better data that's more accurate.
It's interesting to me because every time you read the U.S. News and World Report and Washington Post, every school in our state is ranked. Somebody has completed the survey that says how many IB tests are given, how many AP tests are given, how many are given to low-income students, how many are given by demographic, and we all get ranked. So
But it's not for all options, so early college doesn't show up in there necessarily. It does a good job on some of the AP and IB.
but now we need to do it. We need a third silo. And I do think it is at least our IB coordinator who sets up the summer training that you just mentioned, Hilda. That could be a week-long training that with the partners, who collects this kind of data and answers those surveys for the rankings, who works with the teachers and connects them with opportunities. So it doesn't have to be labor intensive, but certainly it helps to have somebody responsible for that.
Yeah, I also want to just, I've been spending a lot of time in rural Oregon, so I know sometimes the solutions we think of for the urban communities don't work for the rural communities. So I think to have someone designated to do that work might be much harder in rural communities who are already struggling with having teachers teach multiple subjects. And so I just think we got to think about solutions in those areas too.
Okay. So just to complete this strategy, because part of the Outcomes and Investment Subcommittee's focus is around what are the equity considerations with any strategy that's brought forward. Obviously, what we are promoting here is statewide equitable access to something that we already know makes a big difference, increasing the likelihood of high school completion and then moving on successfully into post-secondary ed. This is such a truncated format that we had to use. The fuller paper that you have in your packet references the citations and pieces that we drew from. But I was so taken by this one study that actually looked very clearly at the number of courses that students earn. There was a difference between earning 3 college credit courses and 6, and it went up. So beyond 6 was even better in terms of predicting that students were going to go on to college and that they were going to complete a degree, which is really good. And these were studies that were analyzed looking at students who are traditionally underrepresented in our post-secondary programs. And I think the other thing is drawing back to the OEIB equity lens, we've just called out in that document how important it is that our community colleges and universities are involved with this work together, and that together we are going to be working towards helping more students be successful and ultimately employed. We were asked what other considerations. I think it's very powerful to remind ourselves that right now, of the students who graduated from Oregon high schools between the years of 2004, 5, and 10, 11, 63% of those students went on to developmental education. They enrolled in at least one developmental education course when they entered the community college. That's not even counting the students who might have been in a developmental ed course in 4-year institutions, because of course that data is separate. But this is a particularly alarming figure, and everything that the research is pointing to indicates that the more students can get access to these courses early on, get comfortable, figure out if they are college ready, have access to some of the remedial pieces, and we've referenced the developmental ed work group, which has done a fabulous job of putting forward some very good solutions to that issue. That could help not only the need for this, but the cost. This is a tremendous cost right now that shouldn't be continuing in the way it is. The other thing is that, speaking of costs and time, every time we can help a student acquire more courses towards a final degree, we're saving them some time and some tuition costs. And we all know that everywhere in the concept paper we talked about the importance of transferability. So strategy 2, this came about as a result of all of our discussions around the need to look again at how we're going to have enough teachers available at all of our high schools or through the community colleges to be able to be recommended as dual credit instructors. And so in your full paper, by the way, this is actually strategy 3. And I'll go back and talk about why strategy 2 is being pulled off right now. But this is actually a model that, or a recommendation that if we were to organize our post-secondary institutions that offer graduate coursework in content areas and design a schedule that's built around teachers' needs, like summertime, and make it accessible through online, we could be much more efficient in meeting the needs of high school instructors who do want to earn graduate credit in their content area. Right now, and I know this having been a dean here in this institution, in the state rather, that every institution had different courses. Maybe I offered 2 this term and maybe none next summer. And it made it very hard for candidates to plan how were they going to access it. And then they were somewhat tied to, okay, I'm near Eastern Oregon, so I'll go to Eastern Oregon, or I'm near U of O, I'll go to U of O. What this is built on, and I'm going to jump ahead here to the middle, I'm on the strategy 2 equity considerations. Since 2001, we have had a program in the States, not talked about very much at all, that is involved, at one time I think it involved 5 public institutions out of, that's a majority there, offering online coursework for teachers. This was a result of when Title I required that we had to have literacy specialists in Title I schools. All of a sudden, teachers needed coursework. So we got a FIPSI grant. This was back when Holly Zinville, who is now at Lumina, she wrote a FIPSI grant. We got funding. We got the faculty together. They developed the courses. They approved each other's courses. They approved a schedule. They actually approved a common tuition rate. And those courses are still posted with an 8-term catalog. You can look ahead 8 terms and see which course is going to be offered online, who's offering it. You can even go and look at the reviews of the instructors and pick and choose what you're going to take.
Are they used often?
They are. They are used frequently. And this is the kind of strategy I was thinking about if we really wanted to jumpstart and increase the content graduate coursework of high school instructors. So going back here for a second, what this strategy would do would be to fund teams of faculty, voluntary, if you want to participate, because you might want to offer a course. They would be pulled together during the summertime to actually create online classes that were in the content area. And by the way this works at a university, the university gets the credit for which, if Nancy enrolls in Southern, Southern gets the credit for that course. You also get to pick a host institution that coordinates all of your courses together, so that when you're adding something for your license, one institution, your host institution, submits your paperwork. But each institution gets their fair share of the course credits that are earned by this.
And that's important because of what?
It's an incentive for the universities.
The formula, the finance.
Right, because they count those, and that also is a way that they're planning their budgets. I mean, this will cost the universities to offer the courses, and they still have an instructor cost, even though it's an online. So, and it has to be part of that person's FTE.
Could that incent institutions to promote themselves?
They do.
In order to do this?
The Read Oregon program, the institutions that really do this well are very engaged in promoting. And
I guess that's not a bad thing, but could it be, say they're promoting something that's an inferior program?
the courses are
Not in the best
evaluated
interest of
with
the
one
student. Okay.
instrument. So there was a commonality across how the courses are evaluated. So there's a quality assurance. And when Holly Zanville started this, there was also a process by which the faculty were convened every, I think it was once a year, to really sit down and look at the courses and make sure, do they need any adjustments? And if people didn't like the courses, they wrote about them, and then you didn't see that one offered again. So it kind of was a system that controlled itself, and the teachers drove what their needs were, because they were surveyed. They could actually say, these are the courses I'm trying to get. And then the schedule was built based on a lot of teachers are needing a course in this particular area of literacy. So it's a model, and it has worked for us in the state. These are just the outcomes that we would be able to monitor if we were to request a strategic investment in this area. We'd be able to monitor, of course, the students who are able to get courses still, because now the high school instructors would be qualified to do that. Then we also would be looking at supply and demand on qualified dual credit instructors by region. So that would be relatively easy to do, to be able to ask the administrators of the school, how many of your teachers are certified in which areas, and to figure out, oh, there's a need in science, or there's a need in writing. I've laid out here what the tasks would be. One potential area that would make this a moderate investment rather than a small investment would be if you really wanted to incent participation, to start off with some tuition vouchers for the teachers. That's how the FIPSI grant was done, and it really jump-started the project so that people heard about it. And then when the grant funding was no longer there, people had heard enough about it, and they were willing to go ahead and continue supporting it. I listed that the very same equity considerations that were on the other slide. So, and other considerations we're going to hear today from the Oregon Community College Association and the Confederation of Oregon School Administrators, who are working collaboratively on some processes, and their solutions may include some other ideas that we want to pay attention to. But I know that they are very aware of the need, and I've heard some of them actually talk about, well, maybe we need some strategies to figure out how community college faculty can be encouraged to teach these courses at a higher level. So I know we'll hear more from them today. The third strategy is around the concept that was in the full concept paper around a blended advising model. And this comes from talking with folks at the post-secondary level who talked about what kinds of supports and strategies they provide, particularly for first-generation students, talking to people who run early college programs and the kinds of supports that they provide for students, and then also talking to those successful high schools that really have a lot of offerings. If we don't pay attention to what the advising and supports are, then just making the courses available it's not complete. And we don't have a statewide plan or model or models that districts can look at to say, oh, I need to be able to make sure that these things happen. So what this does, it's based a little bit on some models that we've looked at in the Southern Oregon Success Collaborative that was in the appendix of your full paper, and also what Eastern Promise has learned from their work. And what we envision could happen, whoops, I'm not getting the next slide, here we go, is that this could, at the bottom here, give us a sort of a template for if we're going to offer some college success courses for students at the high school level, what might those look like? What would post-secondary think needs to be part of that course? What would high school instructors think need to be part of that course? And it could be various models. I've seen some that offer a 1-credit course. I've seen some that do a 1 credit for 3 years in a row. But it's this idea that you need to accompany access to college credit courses with the advising and the supports that students need to be successful. This could also be the opportunity, and I've talked to Rob Saxton about this, to fully maximize something that is in our high school diploma requirements, and that is the completion of the individual profile and career plan. And everybody that I've talked to agrees that that is totally underutilized in this state. It could be a powerful tool that helps students figure out their next steps, track their progress. Peter Tromba and I have talked about whether or not at some point the longitudinal data system would have a component where the student could actually monitor their own progress and their own data on their journey through school. And lastly, this is how we would be able to coordinate all of this information that parents are trying to wade through right now, trying to understand the difference between early college and accelerated models and dual credit and just everything that's out there. What I think this would probably help us do, of course, is to track students who are 9th grade on track, and of course high school graduation rates, number of course credits that transfer, and of course the students that eventually transfer to post-secondary institutions. So those are the key outcomes and how we would be able to monitor that. Same equity considerations apply for this strategy, and the only other considerations I put in here again, this would be the more students go in with strong understanding of what supports are available and the advising that helps them be successful, we are going to reduce the need for remediation over time. And we will also make sure that students are not taking courses that don't transfer, thus saving time and tuition costs. So that concludes a...
On that last point,
Yes.
Hilda, is there any way to quantify that savings?
I've heard different figures, and I thought today, I actually had a placeholder in there, and I thought I need to verify that number because I've heard different numbers on what we are paying right now. And I don't see Gerald, I don't see Elizabeth or Lisa. Does anybody here have that figure? Andrea, do you know that figure offhand?
If the placeholder number that you were going to put in there but didn't,
I don't
what
wanna
is
rattle.
that figure?
I'd rather not say publicly because then it could be wrong. And here's the problem. Developmental education, and thank you to my colleagues who helped me understand this. Developmental education is tracked, but it's a big blanket term used for lots of students, including adults who are returning to community colleges after being out of school for 20 years. And so what we're really looking at is the post-secondary remediation courses, and you can't quite always tease out in a class, oh, you're a high school graduate within the last 2 years and you're sitting next to somebody who's 28 and returning for a remediation course. So,
Yeah.
but we know that we would dramatically reduce at least the people who were coming out of high school.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if you, John, Lou, and I know that if you're going to build a business case for this, it's a lot easier when you could say, but you'll be saving $25 million a year. Or
Well, I will be
Yeah.
glad to talk with Elizabeth, who is really spearheading the work group, and just see if there's any way we can parse the data a little better to get a good number for
an
you.
approximate, yeah.
Hilda,
Yes.
a couple of weeks ago in the House Ed Committee, Nancy and Rob came and talked and answered questions, and one of them was about how Common Core standards are going to, how we're projecting they're going to eliminate a lot of the need for remediation entering higher ed. And so it's definitely a concern on legislators' minds as we try to, as we move new standards in and the individual curriculums that are involved in those standards and the communication with higher ed and how are we communicating with higher ed about where the remediation's needed and how do we overcome that? So it's,
So I've had the privilege of working with a Core to College group this year that's been, right now it's directed by Lisa Mintz. And this has brought together faculty from 2-year and 4-year institutions and K-12. And one of the things that they did was specifically look at, once we have implemented Common Core, are there any ways that that would impact placement tests, for example? Would a student who really did beautifully on the SBAC and scored a 4, do they need to turn around 6 months later and take another placement test? And so there's some good beginning work that's happening there, and right now some recommendations are being vetted with various groups like the Council for Instructional Administrators and the Provost Council, and eventually they'll come to the Best Practices of Student Transitions Committee in the fall. But we began that conversation knowing that once real implementation of Common Core moves forward, we will see some change. It'll take some time.
You know, one of the slides that really reinforced the importance of Common Core to me is the 65% of the students who go into developmental ed, because really what the Common Core is that makes it different than our current standards is it starts with what are the skills you need to be college and career ready. And it designs down for there. So we had standards in Oregon, but they weren't necessarily what it took to be college and career ready. Well, when you're going into a community college, they're assessing whether you're college and career ready. And so if we didn't have that alignment, it became a real problem. So I think, and I agree with Hilda, that they're also then trying to work towards, if this is to 12th grade, what do they look like the rest of the way up the pipeline? So definitely connected.
I guess I'm still not convinced that what the Common Core is doing puts them ready for the community college, or for the college. That the things that are being presented as Common Core are in fact what a math teacher wants to see at the community college, or what an English teacher wants to see at the college level, the freshman level. I'm still very cynical about that, just so that you know. I don't see that as necessarily, those are not necessarily connected. They may have a set of standards, but they may not necessarily be connected with what we want to see, because we had a set of standards that was supposed to be that in 21st Century Schools Act 1991, the SEMCAM was supposed to be setting folks up so that they would be ready for college as well, and it apparently didn't work. So it's not, for me, it's not just the language that's important, but if it is in fact what we're seeing from the professors in the universities and in the community colleges, what they want from students, is the Common Core actually connecting with that? And I haven't seen that that has not been confirmed to me.
This would be a great question to ask the group from OEA and AFT who we'll be working with around that. So let's make sure we get that on there. Because those are all teachers who are, just to get a general sense.
Well, yeah, but I think it's also a significant question to ask also the community college teachers and the university teachers.
They are.
That are these Common Core ideas exactly what you want to come in here?
Right.
I haven't, and my discussions both with the OEA and with the teachers at K-12 and with the university folks, there's not been that connection. They're asking for different things. The reading teachers, the English teachers are asking that folks have a broad base of knowledge in terms of language. What we're seeing coming out of Common Core is not a broad base. It is designed to pass the test, which shows a very narrow perspective. So that's the difference that I'm talking about.
Thank you.
I guess I have a slightly different perspective, because I think the Common Core is going to ask that teachers teach and help students be successful in nonfiction as well as fiction, and those will be good things, especially for boys who've been inundated with fiction only, and research shows that nonfiction will actually really support their achievement. So my issue isn't with the Common Core so much, but I think it's a good question maybe that your question prompted for me is what will be different in our state from when we created higher standards 20 years ago. And I really think that's going to be tied to, is the poverty wealth gap bigger today than it was then? There's some other factors we need to do some work on. The other piece that I just wanted to note is if we can't afford to put something like a 0.5 coordinator in schools, I think eventually we're going to have to look at how we can fund different to get more funding for the things that we really need. And I know part of this work is about strategic investments. So ultimately, when we're talking about college credit, if we're funding to pay for kids to take the PSAT, and then we're funding them to take the SBAC, and then we're going to fund them to take IB or AP tests, at what point does that funding become redundant when we really need a 0.5 FTE to manage the program the same way IB requires that we have an IB coordinator? So I think that we can't do it without labor, but maybe how we fund our system could be streamlined.
Thank you for that point.
I mean, essentially, to earn a college credit, you could have been tested 3 or 4 times because you're going to have to take that college level course credit too. I mean, that assessment, that end of course assessment. And some of these are going to line up when you're talking about the kinds of credits you want to fund, but they're English and not PE, no diss on PE. But you had mentioned some core college courses. So if we keep assessing for the same things.
So every time we're assessing, we're spending less time in instruction, so if we're.
And more money. All those assessments cost a lot
Which
of
could be
money.
used for something else.
But then isn't the coordinating function a little different than assessment? Because funding,
Yes.
when you're funding, kids taking the PSAT or the AP exam, that's a assessment. IB coordinator position is more of a little bit of a coordinator position where you bring resources together. It's not really funding the assessment.
No, it's just a map of funding in our state. Then when we talk about these strategic investments, because I wouldn't want to not figure out how to invest in the labor, but continue to invest in over-testing or over-assessing our kids if they're in that situation.
So we might be weighted more to funding assessments rather than when it gets to that point.
She's talking about cost shifting and also making it so
Return.
kids aren't taking so many tests if they're testing the same thing.
And in terms of equity, if we are really investing in kids through assessments, but then kids who aren't accessing IB classes, for example, why double fund assessments for some kids or triple fund assessments for some kids and then not be assessing other kids who really we need the data on, we need to support them, we need to put additional supports in. But when I look in my school who's being multiply assessed, and I know in other parts of the world, either there are no assessments until end of year, like in Finland, but even in other places, there are some waivers. So if you're a full IB student and you're demonstrating college level proficiency in all subject areas, why are we paying for you to take the SBAC? Or why are we going to pay for you to take another assessment? I mean, there should be some waivers over time. I mean, ultimately, I don't think we'll be testing all these kids this much. We just haven't figured out exactly where to do it.
I hope not, anyway.
No, we all hope so.
Yeah, we all gotta work on that.
In that map, because that's a big funding cost, the cost of IB tests, AP tests, SBAC tests, PSAT tests, we're going to just put a note to state. Let's look at that over time.
So I guess where we sit right now is these 3 strategies that are sort of in addition to a sustainable model that has all of the other elements that are described in the concept paper. These 3 strategies were pulled out as sort of jumpstart one-time transformational changes. And so I offer these to the committee as an opportunity to say, do you want to move any of these forward? Do you want to move all of them forward? Obviously, there's no guarantee that they would make a high priority for the Oregon Education Investment Board. This is simply moving them forward for a discussion with that Outcomes and Investments group.
So I think it'd be good to go around and hear from everyone, just so you know where we are. We're on page 5 and 6 in your paper, and the only difference is that the strategy that we're no longer having in here,
I can talk about what.
yeah, is, do you want to talk about that, what strategy we're taking out?
At the bottom of page 5 where it says Strategy 2, Online Course Offerings, this was initially mentioned in several different testimonies that we had, that maybe we need to think more creatively about online course offerings. And then I really did a lot of research and reading on this because I was a little nervous, having taught online courses for graduate students. I was a little nervous about how this was going to play out for the student populations that we're really trying to reach here. And so then I tried to look at, well, hybrid programs, which are generally a combination of face-to-face and online. And that seemed to be better, but there isn't a lot of research yet out there that says that first-time students, first-time generation students do really well in hybrid courses. Then I also got sort of a message that our community college folks and K-12 folks in their recent discussion were also at the same point of realizing, wow, we really have to make sure that there is a set number of classes that everybody could have access to. And so I pulled this for now because I think there might be some other solutions for it.
Yeah, so that one you would take out on page 5, but you would look at what's on the page, what's strategy 1, 3, 4. So can we start with you, Representative Huffman? Any thoughts about these?
I'll put up, let's put all 3 back up too.
I'm still on what Hilda was saying about, because I was talking hybrid back in '09 or whenever we did the online learning task force, K-12 stuff, and stressed the point that I didn't want any individual or group trying to kill online education, because Condon someday, if they haven't already, will probably have to contract with somebody to provide 5th grade science or something like that. And they would have, so it'd be a hybrid model. They'd have a learning coach who was not certificated in 5th grade science, but the teacher online would be, and they'd end up being the coach in the classroom. So as far as, I guess when I've been talking about, we will necessarily have to provide some of these classes online for certain districts or schools. I guess I was always envisioning a hybrid kind of model from that. So anyway, I won't digress and go back too far on that. But
What are you saying that's important to keep as an option? Yeah, okay.
So can I clarify one thing? There may be some online courses out there. This was a strategic investment to build more and to make sure that everybody knew that they were there. I think that, Oregon State has had a long history of offering courses for credit for high school students online. They probably have done more than some of the other four-year institutions. So I don't think it totally removes it from the plate. It just pulls it off as a strategic investment to go out and convene faculty and build more courses. If some of them already exist, the rest of the concept should help promote those as a potential area. But the one thing that dawned on me was that you're not really saving any money in terms of instructors because
yeah, and
you still have to have the person in
It wasn't
school.
a money saving.
It's an access issue.
Right.
accessibility
Yeah.
and just being able to deliver
Yeah.
the credit to the courses that are needed.
So you might be in favor of keeping that in right now?
Yeah, but I think we would need to kind of do a checkup also. I had dealt with community colleges, and I don't know if Andrea would have an update on this or not, but over the last couple of years, over the last 4 years, I've been a little harsh on college-level online courses, that an online course is not an online course is not an online course. So much of it depends on the instructor. And community colleges have changed in the last 2 years, I think it is, in the delivery system and whatnot. But, there was, and I'm not going to get into the weeds on it, but there were things like course quality, instructors being responsive to students, responding to emails prior to grading or testing time, which was critical. Too many online instructors were treating adult learners as high school freshmen, and how they were treating them as students, and on and on. So I think we need to do an assessment and make sure that the quality of the courses that were being delivered for college credit to juniors and seniors was there, certainly. Anyway.
Yeah, so we're
I'm sorry,
going
but what was the original question?
well, we're going around to see if these are the 3 strategies that we're proposing were the ones that we would go to the Outcome and Investment Committee of the OEIB to ask for some possible investment. Know what that process is. Everyone's bringing everything to that committee, that education lies that we think we need, and we think it will take some money, and then the committee will start prioritizing those. But if these are the 3 coming out of this committee, I heard you speaking about online learning, and so the question is, should we put that back in or leave it out, knowing that it's not happening, we're just not asking for an investment?
I think we just need to know where it's happening, what's available, to make sure that from the equity lens that districts that maybe aren't close to the community college or low student population or whatever the reason is, that they have access to stuff. But Peyton was talking about it quite a bit, and I've harped on it for at least the last 2 to 4 years, that at every level, advising is just, we're not funding it, we're falling down, it's critical. A lot of our problems you can trace right back to a lack of advising, whether it's at the middle school level, high school, or higher ed, or I get in a lot to college credit for veterans, and we just had a hearing the other day making sure that at our colleges, our veterans that come in are being advised properly to the programs that are available to them at no cost. And so that's, I don't know that one is more important than the other, but that's definitely a priority for me.
Okay, great, thanks. Nori, how about these 3? Can you support those? Is there anything else you feel you...
I think 1 and 4, are critical, and 1 from an equity standpoint is probably most important to get everybody moving in the right direction here. And I would echo what Representative Huffman said here about advising is critical, because it's a really complicated area to navigate, and I don't think I understand it all. So for students and parents in high school, I think it's critical that they get not only get guidance, but information and all the options to begin with. But I had a broader question or comment here. We're talking about funding, again, programs here, but I think where we want to go is more of an outcome-based funding, where we're not funding the tools to get there, but we're funding outcomes. For example, what we want is the students to achieve more, attain more college credits. So if we give buildings money for that, if you take a student who's a first-generation college goer, get them to college, that's worth something to the high school. So in a way that the high school gets that, whether it's through advising or offering more programs, is up to the building. But even providing, giving some autonomy to the buildings and principals and what best works for their students and community. So I think, obviously, having the course and advisors is sort of foundational piece, but I'd like to see more of it saying, hey, we want to not reward, but fund these outcomes. And, I don't necessarily want to see, I had an example, I was able to, as a board member, present diplomas at Summit High School last weekend, and our valedictorian, had this fabulous opportunity to turn down Stanford and Princeton and Oxford and Yale and all these schools to go to Harvard. And he comes from a well-to-do family, and students like that don't need to. We don't need to provide additional funding for an outcome like that. But we had the principal have all first-generation college goers stand up. In a class of about 350, we had about 20 students stand up, and that was a great moment. And Summit High School is a pretty low poverty, high income school, and that was good to see. And we should fund, or we should outcomes like that, because that's what we're talking about here. And my other comment was that with online course offerings, whether it's for teachers or for students, I don't think that the state should reinvent the wheel here. I think there's programs out there that exist that we can adapt. So I get a little concerned when we talk about increasing courses and whatnot. And I'm not an expert in this area by any means, but I would think there's a lot of good content out there already. So I would dig a little deeper and say exactly what we would be doing if we go forward with 2 and 3. And I also agree with Representative Hutton here that the hybrid is probably what's going to work better with this age group than purely online programs. Something that's been mentioned here firsthand, Central Oregon Community College. I was reading the budget the other day. I'm not sure why, but maybe I was tired of watching the fire blazing in our region. But the biggest single department in the budget is the math department. The math department gets $1.7 million to COCC a year. And they're by far, not by far, but they're the largest academic department. And if you look at the COCC course offerings in mathematics, most of the courses are remedial. And so obviously there's a lot of, clearly, you made the point here, but there's a lot of resource being devoted to developmental classes. And if we can catch these students earlier, and granted some of these are adult learners and not recent graduates, but I think that would generate a lot of cost savings. And as Senator Hassan mentioned, that we'd like to talk about some cost savings here as well.
Okay, thank you. Representative Frederick?
I don't want to echo what John and you have said, but I think it's important to say that I think the quality issue in terms of the online courses is what I've been watching for the last few years since I was on state board. I had a lot of my first experience with someone lobbying me was the different online companies coming to lobby me, and so I took them seriously, and decided to look at their courses and just see how good they were, and they weren't that good. Frankly, there were some that were good and some that were just terrible. They were just pieced together things, and so my concern is about quality of the courses, the hybrid nature, and how you deal with advising and having staff. That is also an important part, but I think it's going to be a matter of having the online courses, knowing what online courses are there, and then finding out which ones are in fact quality courses. We need to find some way to make sure that that's the case. That's a concern that I have. I am also concerned about the partnership aspect, not just in rural communities, but that was what I was going to ask you about. The rural community partnership thing is something we went into way back when. We started talking about CAN. We couldn't find folks who could be those partners in the CAM aspect. And I think that's still a concern that we're going to have. It's just a matter of how we can get that connected. So I'm curious about that.
Particularly in the frontier areas.
The frontier, yes. Yeah. I mean, we have, I mean, I saw that taking place when I was a reporter looking at North Powder. And just finding how do you get something there when the math courses only went up to Algebra 2 because they didn't have teachers who could do it. And they didn't have a relevant business sense that would work, that they could get involved with, or the community college was not available for folks, just because of distance more than anything else at that time. So those are the concerns that I have. I like the three that works. It's just that I want to make sure that we are thinking about those issues, and that's where I'm.
Thank you. Senator Hance?
Well, my reason for being behind this trade has always been to get at those students who don't have parents to motivate them and therefore are not motivated. We don't do a terrible job of dual credits in the state. It's just that it's the sort of bottom 70-75%, if you will, who just can't figure out how to do it or don't know why they should do it. And I think that could come through more advisors, as Representative Huffman pointed out, and I think that would help. And I do think there are some financial incentives that might help that. This is, in fact, what Rob Saxon and I toyed with when we were trying to put this together in the 2013 session. And what we had looked at was, okay, if the standard in Oregon is 20% of your students receive some sort of dual credits, then a school district would receive, say, $100 for every additional dual credit module above that, and that would get their attention, and that would work. But we just, we didn't have the firepower in March of 2013 or the time to flesh that out, vet it, and pass it. So as a result, we're here now where we have more time to do exactly this. But I don't know if that's the answer either, and if it's not a stick, then maybe it is a carrot. The legislation that created this task force originally had in it a requirement that in order to graduate, a student must have 9 college credits. And there were some superintendents that liked that. There were some school board people that liked that, but a majority of them hated it. So that was taken out. But if you do have that mandate, that will get districts' attention too, and that will create, some behavior. For every action, there's an opposite and equal reaction, I think is how that goes. So I think these go in that direction, but in the end, it feels like in order to create that action, there will have to be some sort of a stick and a carrot, or we'll never get there.
So the carrot piece that we built into the financial model that we shared with you last time is that extra bump for districts who do get the students through. So we got the carrot in there. The stick?
Yeah.
So we did build that in to that financial model, and then, so.
Yeah, and I'm just, I go back and forth on the requirement. And it may be time, and I think honestly, I know the OEIB, I know the achievement compacts have those kinds of agreements and compacts, but those are not binding. And I think in law that I don't think that it's too much to ask in 2015 to say, okay, with additional money, this is also what you should be providing.
Yeah.
And so I may be too far out there, I don't know, but we're moving forward here, and then you can find 1,000 different reasons not to do this, but the one that I keep looking at, in sync with today's reality of our economy and needing to get these kids into some sort of technical training or education, as opposed to just really nothing, which is a pathway to poverty.
Right.
I think you can make a strong business case for doing this.
Right.
Sorry to ramble.
Well, that was good.
Yeah.
Payne?
My only thing is being careful about incentivizing districts versus schools. Because Hilda has mentioned, oh, there's these great CTE and STEM. I can't access them, the district does. So, I mean, that's just something to think about. And then I liked what Nori said about the first generation college students being celebrated and standing up. I also get concerned times when we don't look at the kids. So that's looking at the kids, not judging them in the context of the school. Because sometimes these strategic investments don't follow the kids. They go to a school or a district, and then the district puts them at certain schools. Because I look like a school like Grant probably has more historically underserved kids than all of the kids at Jefferson, for example. But the percentage of them at Jefferson is huge, where it's smaller at Grant. So how do we stay focused on individual students? And yes, there's an AP program at Grant, but who's accessing it, who's not? So maybe they also need funds to get all kids to access 3 credits. But if you look at them, it's probably like 26%, free and reduced lunch maybe, compared to Jefferson's 70%. And I'm just using a local example. I'm sure there are statewide examples. So I guess I love this, well done. Those would be my 3 top priorities. And depending on who speaks, I want to move them in a different order, but all 3 are great. And I guess just something that hasn't come up has been about maybe we align it to our state improvement plan, because that looks at each school and how the students are growing in that school. So we know at Lincoln we're fairly an outstanding school in attendance and achievement, but really low performing in growth. So
Okay, there's 2 great ideas that we can put right into the paper, because I just pulled up the financial model, and when Peter and I were working on this, it did incentivize the school district. That's not that hard to change that. And then I think the other thing about building this into the school improvement plans is another way.
Okay, good enough. Are we ready to move on to the next thing on the agenda, which is, I know that OCCA and COSA work group have some recommendations about instructor qualifications to increase access to dual credits. I think you might be still in process. Is that my understanding? We did have a presentation last time. So is there anything today you're going to present, or just?
Well, we thought we'd give an update on the work group meeting that we had last week and where we are.
Okay, sounds great.
Okay.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, for the record, Andrea Henderson, Oregon Community College Association.
Craig Hawkins, COSA.
So, do you want to start, Craig? Do you want me to start? We
Go
didn't
for
plan
it.
this, so.
We didn't plan it at all, as a matter of fact.
So, we convened a group last week that included both community college presidents, community college instructional administrators, high school principals, and superintendents, a small group at our office that met, and really looked at the issue of both teacher qualifications and what is it that we're trying to accomplish, and what do we really need to do to make sure that every student in the state has access to college level courses while in high school. And from that, we had a series of recommendations and next steps that we will be working on. The first is we tried to clarify access to what. And so we tried to really define down what are the key courses that high school students need to have access to. And trying to line it up with the Oregon transfer model, which essentially is the first 45 credit hours. Lined it up to there and came back with a recommendation that at a minimum, there needs to be an access to the fundamental parts of the Oregon transfer model, which is writing 121, math 115, and a speech or communications class. And so that there should be a guarantee that every high school student in the state has to have access to those 3 classes. So that's kind of the minimum standard. Secondly, we looked at the second level in the Oregon transfer module, which calls for essentially 9 credits in science, 9 credits in social sciences, and 9 credits in arts and letters. So our thought was that we should identify a key course in each of those areas. So not assuming that all 9 credits could be offered, but there should be a science class a arts and letters class and a social sciences class that's offered statewide. That gets a little bit more problematic because there's a lot of different options in those, but we want to at least take a look at that area and see if there's a recommendation that we could do kind of around that. And wanted to define that that's kind of the guarantee level. So that's kind of the first piece that we talked about. I don't know, Craig, if you wanted to add anything to that part?
I don't think so. I think we just moved to the next step. Yeah.
So from there, what we'd like to do, yes?
Is it okay if I jump in?
Sure.
One question. We were talking about remediation. How are we going to ensure that the student that enrolls in the college course is actually prepared to do so? And that they actually don't need to take some preparatory classes or more before they can get in that, so that it does truly count for them?
So for a student that's going to take a college level course, specifically Writing 121 or Math 115, I mean, the assumption is that they are ready for that course, and that's really an assessment that will need to be done at the high school level. The last thing that we want is a high school student that comes in and fails a college level course. So that these should be students that are ready for those courses. Once they've taken that course in the high school, it's counted for college credit. They've already satisfied their math standard or their writing standard, so there's not going to be any need for them to even take a placement test because they've already established that and they already have the credit in place.
The other thing along those lines that I've heard a number of principals describe is that they'll have high school classes that are that college level piece, but not every kid is necessarily going to perform at that college level in that course. So there may be some kids who take that course and satisfy the high school credit requirement, but not the college level requirement. And so it can work well for kids whether they're on that college track or not. It's still a rigorous plan for them.
And just being exposed to college level work makes
Exactly.
them more likely to go to college and be successful in college. That's a good point.
Absolutely. So then our second piece was really to, once we identified what the key courses are, similar alignment with your work, but to really define the gap analysis. So given those specific courses, where are the gaps in the state? So taking those first 9 hours, is that available to every high school student? So our Council of Instructional Administrators agreed to take on this work. They're going to report back in about a month to us. That essentially defines what are the agreements that are in place with all the colleges in the state with their high schools around specifically those courses. We did get some preliminary analysis from the state level that Hilda has a copy of that basically looks, are colleges offering these? Is there a partnership in place somewhere? And not all of those are offered at all colleges. So we know already that there are some gaps, but we really need to get that level down to the high school level so that we can see for each student where the gaps are.
Can you give me an example of a gap? Give me an example of a college of courses that are not.
If you give me just half a second to pull it up, I don't have it off my memory, but I'd be happy to pull it up for you. Do you want to talk for a moment while I'm pulling this up?
Sure.
Just talk away.
Well, I'll just throw out some things that I've listened to today, and wanted to share a thought about Peyton's comment about coordination and having coordinators dedicated to high school. Made me think of McMinnville High School. And, they produce, I believe, the most college credits in the state every year. I think it's something like 5,000 among their students. And they have this remarkable assistant principal who also does some district level, Tony McVair, I said his name wrong, Tony Vicknair, who is just an amazing guy. That coordination over the long term, he's been there for a while. That coordination has led to that really robust program. So I think there's something to that.
It's hard to write legislation to get good people to go to this. 20 years.
More Tony.
It is.
Right.
But that's the answer in many
You
ways.
can write legislation that discourages them.
Yeah.
So
I
that's one
think-
of the problems that we want.
I think what that points out, though, is getting a person specific to be a coordinator might work in some districts, but this is part of a vice principal's job. So it's not that someone shouldn't do the
Exactly.
coordinating function.
Exactly.
It's just how it's done in rural Oregon, in, like Portland area or McMinnville might look different. It could be part of someone's, it could be part of a counselor's responsibility if you have one in a rural.
In some parts of Oregon, it can be part of an ESD responsibility
Right.
where, it could work in a variety of ways.
I do worry though when you hear about rural Oregon. I'm the superintendent, I'm the high school principal, and I'm the football coach.
Absolutely.
Right.
And then you don't have local partners, and so you figure out how to get it online or get the.
It's a challenge. And that's really, Peyton, that's really part of the gap analysis, is we've got to identify where those situations exist and then develop the solutions for those situations.
So going back to the gap analysis, what we did learn, and this is just looking at the state coding, so Writing 121 is offered at 16 of our 17 colleges. Oregon Coast does not do any Writing 121 with its high school, so you can see that there's a gap right there from Lincoln County. Math 111 is at all 17 colleges. Math 112 is not at Tillamook Bay or Umpqua. So we can see already that there's some of the very specific gaps. General biology is not at Chemeketa, Oregon Coast, or Tillamook Bay.
General biology.
General biology. So this was some of the gap analysis that was done.
Chemeketa,
Oregon Coast or Tillamook Bay. And then there's the speech and communications one. Most of the colleges don't offer that. So we can see immediately that there are some gaps in place that we will need to solve. So that was kind of the first piece of the step, was to start that gap analysis. We'll have further information after our instructional administrators do a deeper dive into it and say specifically what's being offered at different high schools and what's not. The second piece of this is that we also wanted to do an analysis of the online course capacity. So all of our colleges do have online courses. Some of them are in these key areas. What's the capacity in those online courses, and are there ways to expand that capacity to help with some of these gaps? So that was a second piece that we discussed.
We also actually talked about Orvid and some of the other possible options out there that might help with that capacity, so we'll be looking at that as well.
So, and then the other piece is we don't want to leave out the CTE piece. And while there's many individual programs between high schools and community colleges around CTE, we asked the CTE deans to identify, is there a core number of classes that are offered through that are components of many of the CTE programs. For example, we do know that psychology is a component for many of the CTE programs. As far as we know, this analysis is not done before, but if we can identify a couple of key classes that tend to be in many of the CTE programs, and see if they can't be offered at the high school as well. So it may not be into the detail level of the CTE, but it may be one of the prerequisite courses that's important for many of our CTE programs.
And it would transfer.
And it would
Even
transfer.
if they did not
Exactly.
pursue CTE, it might transfer.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Comment.
Yes.
Andrew, those 4 classes in CTE, I mean, really, most of the community colleges, except for the speech component, offer all of them for, 1 or 2 don't. And, I mean, really, that's, if you look at McMinnville, that's what we're talking about here, are those 4 or 5 colleges. So out of the mix at McMinnville, all of those credits, would you say those 4 classes are kind of the majority of what 11th and 12th graders are getting, or?
My understanding is a wide range. They
wider
get a
than
really
those
wide
4.
range. Oh, yeah, very
That's-
much so. Yeah.
So you couldn't say that those 4 or 5 classes, or those classes you mentioned, Andrea, are 75% of the dual credits that are earned today?
She has a longer list.
There's a much longer list of all the dual credit classes, so I couldn't say definitively. I think we could probably pull some additional data from the state data system and see what we can find out. But I do know that high school students tend to take a wide variety of classes. And I hate to bring in personal experience, but with my daughter that just graduated from high school last year, her credits were in art history and European history. Certainly not math, and that's an area that she has to go back and pick up. So it really depends, I think, sometimes on what the school has. There's the instructors they have at the school and the students' interest. And we really want to make sure it's the core pieces that are going to transfer to everything.
Well, and I think the core pieces, I mean, that's, we want to make sure for that reason, but also if we're doing sort of triage here, then let's focus on those. And that takes away a lot of the problems with getting teachers with their right certification and going back and forth with licensing issues. If we're talking about those 4 classes of writing, math, science, and speech, I mean, that's core. It all of a sudden, when you just look at those, this doesn't look like such a huge undertaking.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a tough conversation, though. Your daughter is friends with my daughter, apparently.
Oh, really?
But it's the equity piece.
Yes.
And you see it in high schools, too. Okay, so high poverty kids get double reading, double writing, double numeracy. And, kids at Lincoln get ceramics and guitar, art history. And then when you're talking about motivating them to go to college and to experience the sex in college, well, you're going to do it in reading, writing, speech and communications. There are ways to get at that, I think, through robotics and constitution team and forensics and Model United Nations that build those skills and then apply them to the real world. That's that's a totally different, I think that's a part of accelerated learning conversation that we haven't been having, but we need to have also. Scaffolding that for the kids so that when they get there, they can earn, how exciting, IB art history. That's going to open up so many, I'd want to go to college then.
Right.
Or you take Math 101. Mm-hmm. If it were a sports statistics class where they got Math 101 or college statistics credit and they could analyze how many 3-point shots could Lillard make, then yes.
Let me echo that, because I think that's absolutely right on target. You're not going to motivate kids that I know to want to go in and take a math class in college. That's just not something they're going to jump up and down about. As much as I would have jumped up and down about it. I'm a geek, so I do that. But the fact is that's one of the finding out what's available across the street for Jefferson High School at PCC Cascade or on Southeast Portland. They're going to want to take a class that will be interesting. It certainly worked personally with my kids. My daughter and my son, two different learners, but they really liked the ability to take classes that they would find interesting and curious, and they're not going to necessarily find writing 101 is interesting if they're not really doing the kind of things that can be fascinating, writing 101, and if they only had writing 101 or writing classes that have been extremely boring in high school.
Okay. Other comments about that?
So, and just a few more items on this. So certainly the next step after we get the analysis back is a commitment to meet again and say, okay, so what are the solutions? How do we make sure once we know our online capacity, we know what the gaps are, then how do we ensure that every student in the state has that access? And so we're assuming is going to be a combination of solutions from online or flipped classrooms, hybrid classrooms, certainly set pieces around how might students, we have like an instructor of record to help in those areas where there isn't a high school instructor that's qualified, certainly some of the odd pieces that were mentioned here. And another, I think, important piece of it that we talked about was convening the faculty around the state in those key areas so that there's that alignment with the faculty. That does take some resources to do, but it really is critically important. So we want to talk about online learning or capacity around these core areas, particularly around speech where there isn't much offered around the state. How do we convene those faculty and have a statewide agreement and some curriculum that can be offered everywhere? So that's essentially, I think, the work. It was, I think, a very well-received conversation, a lot of dialogue.
Yeah, it was great, and it really kind of felt like it followed up. We've been spending the last couple of years meeting superintendents and community college presidents in a variety of other settings where we've partnered on a number of conversations, and it felt like just kind of the natural extension to try to, help get some things done. I wanted to share a couple of things. One is I've really appreciated the work of this committee. Right. I believe that you're right on point, working on the right things, and as you know, we spent some time developing our own set of recommendations, superintendents, principals, and others, and really, it's great to see that. Well, I'll say great minds think alike. I know yours are great minds. I'm limited. The rest of them are great minds, but I really appreciate that. The other thing that I'd say is that the thing I appreciated about our meeting maybe most was the commitment to equity, to really making this about each and every kid having the opportunities that we want them to have. And along those lines, I think there are a couple of things. One is that work around CTE pathways and really trying to get students a good start on a CTE track is really critical. That middle 40, we've got to work on that middle 40. The other thing is we had recommendations around blended advising. I think that's a really good goal. The thing that I would add to that I think is really important and to me goes together with it is about aspiration and family engagement, parent engagement. I think if there's a way to make that goal be a little bit more of that blend, I think we serve that equity piece maybe even in a better way.
Aspirations in family.
And family engagement, parent engagement, yeah.
Yeah, the model that Southern shared that's happening in their regional collaborative that's in the appendix of the long paper is a beautiful way of showing the different levels of supports, including the family engagement there.
Yeah, Hilda, I recognize Scott Perry on that. If you've seen enough Scott work, it's really good. It's really good.
So, are you done?
Yeah.
We put on hold the next topic from the last meeting, so I want to make sure we don't ask them to wait again. So thank you for your work.
Thank you.
Seems like there's been a lot of progress made.
Absolutely.
Yes. So that's very cool.
So we look forward to talking to you again.
Yes.
Thank you.
So Mark, are you on the phone?
I am, Nancy.
Okay, great. Well, we're going to make
Here's
sure we get to you, and so there is a one-page handout.
At the back of your packets, Mark provided this. It's called Eastern Promise Spanish Credit by Proficiency
Okay,
Pilot.
we want to hold that up so people can see what it looks like as we, okay. So if everybody wants to grab that, then Mark will give you the floor.
How much time we looking at? About 5 minutes, Nancy?
Yeah, I think you could have a little more than that, but.
10.
10.
Okay, I'll do a flyby here. Welcome, everybody. I apologize I can't be there in person, but it's a heck of a commute from Eastern Oregon, and I just did it yesterday. So, want to talk a little bit about the Spanish proficiency. It's a new component that we piloted this year with the Eastern Promise. I mentioned this at OEIB, and there was some interest by Nancy and Hilda and a few others to bring this to your group. So basically, what you have in front of you is some data, and let me clarify how we got to that endpoint that's in front of you. First of all, the Eastern Promise has two goal areas that we focus on. Number one is increasing access to college coursework in the high school. And the second one, which is a little more difficult, is the growing a college growing culture. So we have targeted our first generation kids, and really there are three groups in Eastern Oregon that predominantly fall into that, and that is our Latino population, our Native American population, and our students of poverty. And our Latino population is growing significantly in the region. And what we're looking at with this Spanish proficiency exam is really looking at native language, which the new term is heritage, I guess. But heritage speakers, really looking at their language, and predominantly it's Spanish, of course, in our region, as a strength rather than a weakness. So we've talked about, what about all these juniors, seniors, freshmen in our high schools that are fluent Spanish speakers? Why can't we either use credit for prior learning or credit for exam so that these kids can truly use their proficiency? In the Eastern Promise, all the coursework is proficiency based. Why do they need to take a course? Why can't we let them use their natural gifts, their natural strengths to earn up to 12 college credits? So basically we set out, our goal was to try to create a credit by exam that's proficiency based for these kids. And so we started a year-long process that included university faculty, community college faculty, and over 20 high school teachers. And they basically normed and stormed and came up with a very, very strong credit by proficiency exam for 101, 102, 103, and they recently completed the 200 series as well. So we piloted this starting in the winter, So we really have only had 2 terms, and we have targeted predominantly seniors. That's who we wanted to start with. There are so many more kids we never got to, but at the starting point in our region, that's what we went after, the seniors. So we conducted these. We did it in 2 different ways. One is kids were just either pulled out of class or after class or during a study period and were administered this test. Some of the kids were in a class that they administered it, and also it was just a regular assessment for the regular Spanish 3. The 100 level college series is equal to the 3rd year of a high school Spanish course. So the data you have in front of you shows you probably what you would guess is that the heritage speakers are performing at a very high level. 87% of them that took the pilot proficiency exam passed 101. 64 with an A, 64% 102 with an A, and Spanish 3, 63% with an A. So the 100 level series, those are the heritage native speakers that never took the class. Then comparing it to their peers, which you would probably say is a more traditional student in 3rd year Spanish, you can see the success rate there. So our conclusions at this point: the majority of all the students passed the 100 level with an A or a B. The Spanish as a second language students or heritage students, the Spanish as a second language students scored lower on the 102 than the heritage speakers even after 3 years of study. Data is being, right now we're collecting data to see how these indicators compare with the students taking the 100 level series in college. So we're going to compare these scores with the college students that finished 101, 102, 103 at EOU this year as well, to kind of cross-reference to see how the college kids actually are performing on the same area as with these heritage and these traditional students. So we're kind of excited about it for a couple ways. Number one is we believe that we're going to increase that college-going culture. The best way to get a first-generation kid to college is to put them in college and high school. And so we really believe that this has opened doors where these students who previously didn't even think of college as possible are receiving a transcript with 12 college credits. And all of these credits, all Eastern Promise credits, are $10 a credit. Majority of our high schools pick up the tuition for their free and reduced. So the majority of these kids didn't pay anything to get those 12 credits in our region, and we're pretty excited to see how this pilot has played out. So that's basically what I have there, Nancy. It's always hard when you're doing it from the phone. You can't really see body language, but I guess at this time we'll just open it up if there are any questions.
Okay, let's see, anybody have any questions?
Only to let you know that I was cheering you on there, that's all.
Thank you.
So thoughts, why don't we just, our Representative Kaufman, any thoughts about this?
I think it's fantastic. Creative thinking, low-hanging fruit that maybe you look past, but they recognize it. Fantastic.
How's your Spanish?
Let's see, which staff down here?
This is a no-brainer.
Okay.
No-brainer for me.
Same thing, I wish we would have done this years ago.
Yeah. Peyton?
We're doing it in
Welcome to
high
Unified
schools.
Conferencing.
So it just went up.
Well, your 10 minutes are over, Mark. Nice.
I guess the only thing I would say is sometimes
Is he still on? Is he still on, Mark? Mark, are you still on?
Mark?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
Okay.
I guess these conversations do, though, just raise the awareness for me that we don't have statewide systems. So when we talk about how do we track this data, I think, aren't we doing that in Naviance? Well, maybe some districts are using Naviance and some aren't. So statewide Naviance. And then there was another one, Synergy. I can run a report of how many kids are short 2 or more credits at the end of 9th grade. And I think other districts must be able to do that, but maybe not statewide. And this one, too, it's, our districts are giving credit by proficiency for foreign language, in almost, 17 different languages. So I thought, that must be happening statewide. So I do think we need this map and do need to identify practices that are actually working.
The coordination.
And then figure out how to get them statewide.
I really appreciate that. And, Hilda, are you there?
Yes, I am.
maybe there's a time later we can talk about our discussion about trying to standardize the Math 111 and the Writing 121 aligned to the Common Core, because we're doing so much in K-12 to standardize with the Common Core. It's just natural that we move into early learning and also higher ed and align those standards from the Common Core. Because you really look at what a senior level Common Core class is, it's a lot of 101, 102 type of work. So I think the more that we transition with that, the more we look at and share these practices. What was exciting about this project is we had 25 foreign language teachers in the room that came away with agreement, and that is rare. And the more we can get our teachers together to standardize and to work through these sorts of things, the better the product's going to be for kids if they all know what the targets are.
Well, that sounded like an endorsement for the presentation right before you that you didn't get a chance to hear, so I'll fill you in on that later.
Yeah, but Mark,
Okay.
I really want to thank you for your leadership in this area. As we think of dual credit, you've been one of the leaders who are making it happen and bringing people together regionally and helping us think about the importance of coordination. So I really appreciate that.
Absolutely, Nancy.
Any more questions for Mark? We're all smiling, Mark.
Well, just kind of a mutual love fest then. Thank you for all the work this committee is doing. I've been watching your efforts, and you're doing really, really good work. And people in the state are paying attention to it. And I really think that we're moving the dial on this whole alignment between high school and college. And I think we're going to get more kids to the finish line by the type of work that you're doing as well. So I thank you.
Okay, thank you. Seth, do we have any public testimony today? No? Okay, so let's look at...
So I have one comment here. The OUS boardroom as of July is going to cost $250 an hour, right, to use?
What?
This room. So I just put that out there as we think about next meetings. And
So the meeting might be at a different location, might not, but we remember we're taking July 9th off of your schedule so that we have time to put all this good feedback together. And we'll meet again August 13th, and the location will be to be announced. I think we can safely say it will be in Portland because...
I would be happy to host it at Lincoln. We'll actually have parking and space on August 13th.
love it.
Does that sound good?
All right.
We'll go to Lincoln. That sounds great. Okay. So that ends our meeting. Thank you very much.